I guess we can, Chief is probably going to do this, but because I was sort of participating in the search, I'd like to welcome Jonathan. Jonathan is the new Deputy Chief.
Yes.
Welcome back to Vermont.
Thank you very much, very much. Yeah. Hello,
Welcome.
everybody. I look forward to meeting you all in a more informal setting, but yeah, I am the new Deputy Chief of Operations. Very, very happy to have been selected. Grew up in Vermont, am coming back here, and am incredibly eager to join what I think is one of the best police departments in the country with regard to the things that it's doing progressively for community relations, for opioid, addressing the opioid epidemic. Really, really terrific team, and I'm very much looking forward to learning from it. It's been 2 days, and thus far it has been that cliche that I really disliked but can only use it to describe it, drinking from a fire hose. So it has been a very, very intense 2 days learning, and I've got a lot longer to go, but I look forward to being a contributory part of the team instead of just somebody who's trying to suck up all the information I can consume. Thank you.
It just occurred to me as I looked around the room that we have, and thank you, that was my chief's report, so you just did it. You have this, like, I'm sorry, just indulge me for a second, because you have a chief who went to Dartmouth, the deputy chief who went to Harvard, this analyst went to Princeton. All three of them have a master's from Harvard. That could either be a great thing or disaster in American policing, and we're gonna find out the hard way, I guess, just because it's interesting to, you know, see if we can keep our street smarts about us. You know, like, who's going to bring us back down to earth using common sense and good judgment and keep us on the ground? There's like guys like Lieutenant Mike Warren, actually, when we get too highfalutin. So, in fact, that's been really useful tonight. It's important to note as well that Lieutenant Warren was like one of the down-to-the-wire finalists in this race. He had an interview with the mayor, made it through the process really quite far. It was a very difficult decision regardless. Ultimately, like, you know, you have to trust your judgment, but then you do second guess yourself. So I do want to say we're, like, you know, privileged to have this depth of leadership in the room, and that we have men and women who are ready to, or will soon be able to, or could easily have taken the helm, including Mike Warren. So when you see Lieutenant Warren sitting here, know that you know, it's not just like some fancy pedigree that helps you get the job. It's hard work and experience. And we have an embarrassment of riches that extends beyond this side of the room. It goes all the way to the back right there. So thanks. I don't know if you want to say anything, but Mike did, I mean, he did extraordinarily well in the process. So
I don't have much to say. You know, I actually learned a lot from the process, and it was really interesting to me. And you know, I reached out to John just slightly before he came here, but I'm very excited for him and hope he's very successful here. And, I just look forward to continuing to come to work every day. So
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as far as the rest of the chief support go, the only thing I'll say, two minor things. We have some stuff to go over in executive session, but one is you ask often about the database that people can put themselves into if they're in mental crisis. So we know, if you know what I'm talking about. We have this idea that we could solicit people's voluntarily their guidance as to whether they're subject to mental crises, and if they are, who they should call, what triggers them, who not to talk to. And you know, we've been having a series of meetings with with folks from state mental health and from the Howard Center, and they asked, what can we do to ease some of our mental health crises? And I brought this up, and they said, why haven't we done it? I gave them the same excuse I gave you, the ACLU. We're just going to go ahead and do it and let the ACLU fight it. If you don't know what I'm talking, you know what I'm talking about, Randall?
I don't.
So one of the issues we had when we ended up fatally shooting Phil Brennan is that we did not know who to call to get help. We had one lead, which was his clinical provider, but she was on vacation in Australia at the time. We had nowhere else to go as far as relatives or friends or anything. And not to say it would have necessarily turned out differently, but it occurred to us, because we're getting feedback from people in the community in the aftermath of the shooting. If I'm ever having a mental health crisis, like, what are you going to do, or who are you going to know? If I'm ever locked up in a room with knives, as a person who needs mental help because I'm having a crisis, who are you going to know how to call, and who are you going to know to talk to? And so we had this idea of creating a voluntary input where you can fill out a form that we verify it was you, we call you back, but saying, if I'm ever in mental crisis, or I'm the guardian of someone, if they're a child who has a propensity for mental health crises, here's who they do want to talk to, here's who they don't want to talk to, here's what to say to them, here's what not to say to them, and here's the best approach. And so we demurred from doing that because we had privacy and HIPAA concerns, and the ACLU actually fought all these databases across the country. But I just think there's a need for it, and our colleagues at the Howard Center and the state echoed that, the advantages of this. So in the coming weeks, we're just going to try it. One of the reasons why I think we're ready to do it too is we created a portal to report orphanage abuse and dump it into a backside database. We could do it easily for this too. Our analyst knows how to create these portals, so we're going to try to create one. I guess that brings me to, I guess I had more than I thought.
Chief, on that?
Yeah,
Just
please.
a question on that. I mean, has there been any effort to reach out to the ACLU to try to come up with like a pilot program of some sort that can be supported rather than necessarily
I
potentially
mean,
bang?
I'd be amenable to that. I just think they're categorically against the police department creating databases of people with mental illness. It's just, that's been their, I'll check if you think it would be
I
helpful.
mean, I don't know, it's just an opportunity before it's lost to see if there's a way to work together on something that might be, might have some parameters that are acceptable, that works also for us.
Sure.
I think I guess you both would know better than I do, but reading the fight they had in New York, I think ours is going to be voluntary.
Right.
And that's a big deal.
It's a key difference. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I agree.
Yeah, and the second is that if you update it regularly, it seemed to me that you'd be in good shape legally.
Right, at some interval, you could re-email the
Yeah.
people and say, do you wish to remain in the
Yeah.
database? No,
Yeah.
so that's fair. I mean, I think that's a good point, Jim.
So will there be any opportunity for mental health providers or any other third party to enter information to the database as it's
I think that the
thought of right now?
person who we'd want to, it would have to be somebody who has power of attorney or is a legal guardian or is the person him or herself.
Mhm.
So it can't just be a mental health provider opining on what a patient might need. So I think that's how we're foreseeing it, right? So not necessarily a doctor unless they're a guardian. I don't see that as being the case. But we want to let doctors know so they can encourage their patients to register. And I'm not going to commit, not to be cute or caged, I'm not going to commit to a timeline. We're talking about weeks, but we are going to take a look at that as time.
Can I just follow up really quick? Because the other concern would be concerned family members of majority age patients, right? So
Right.
parents, brothers, sisters, people are concerned about people in their family. They're not allowed, I assume, to enter information about their family members into databases like this.
Yeah, so what I was thinking as far as the model goes would be, they'd have to provide a callback number. There'd have to be a way to verify that this is actually the person in question, or a guardian, or power of attorney. And so no, I mean, I don't know what your gut reaction is to it, but they're clearly trying to what's I'm saying, act as a fiduciary or a guardian, but I think the law is kind of clear on it in Vermont. I think that would be the nail. What do you think, ethicist?
Well,
Any time to think about this and do the research?
There are some parallels between various kind of health information sharing portals that have been, various commercial models have been proposed in various places about how to get reliable health information, family history information about patients. And there are different models, some of which only the patient themselves can upload information. Usually that's going to be not necessarily the most accurate because they might have been hearing false information about what their uncle or their grandfather had or whatever. Again, any model has its various downsides, right? And so I think that you want, in this case, to err on the side of maximum protection for the person who's most at, potentially most at risk, and that would be the patient themselves, right, or the person themselves.
Right.
So yeah, erring on that side, I think would be probably
No, fair enough.
ideal.
To be continued. Orphanage, we opened an investigation into the orphanage, as everybody who's been looking at any Vermont media might know. The investigatory parties are the Burlington Police Department, the state's attorney, the Vermont State Police cold case folks, and TJ Donovan, State Attorney General. Right now, we've gotten dozens of allegations, some of which are rehashes of prior allegations, some of which are new, because as of Friday, the diocese, after a meeting we had on Friday morning, agreed to release everyone from their non-disclosure agreements that they were subjected to earlier. So some people feel free to speak now. I can talk more about that, but I think that was a really wise move. And we also have the prior depositions from the past and allegations made in the BuzzFeed article, which I presume most of you know about. So the way we see that going is, the Burlington Police Department will do for each person coming forward as a victim, we will conduct an investigation. It'll oftentimes be historical. We'll try to identify suspects, try to collect evidence. We'll look at prior depositions. We'll look at fact patterns. You can imagine, let's say that there's 48 victims that come forward. I'm just picking 4 dozen. It's not the number. What we intend to do is open up 48 cases of the appropriate type of abuse based on the testimony. And then we plan to make as strong a case as we can make, irrespective of statute of limitations or, ability to do anything about it, irrespective of whether the perpetrator's alive or dead. I mean, a lot of these nuns and priests and janitors and whomever are deceased. Give that investigative package to the state attorney, who will decide whether it can or can't be prosecuted. I think that's actually one of the easier decisions, right? Based on the evidence, based on whether the suspect is alive, and based on the statute of limitations. And then I think it gets a little more complicated when it rises to the level of the state attorney general, but I see his work, and I think there's consensus that it's twofold. The first part is to and this is the hard part, to say, was there something that the state could have done in the past that it did or did not do? So I think people want to know why in the 80s or 90s, when people were alive and the recollections were fresher and the evidence was better, why something was or wasn't done, for various reasons. I think people would like to know that for each case. And then lastly, sort of a truth and reconciliation. There are models out of Boston and Albany more recently where the diocese met with victims in a candid and open way based on what was discovered and tried to offer its accounting of what happened. And then to the extent that we can, I can't promise this and I don't know where it's going to go, but I thought with the right respects for privacy, with the right consent of the victims, with the right redactions, we may want to make public as much of the investigative content as we can so that the community can see what we were able to determine happened in that place. Please.
You know that there was an Attorney General's investigation in the 90s?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, was that with Bill Sorrell?
Yep.
Yeah, we do.
I just remembered, I wasn't
No,
part
it's
of, I wasn't part of it.
interesting, right? What could have been that NDAs were signed, and people, I mean, there's a lot of variables here, right? And it was a different culture and a different time, and people felt differently about sexual abuse and believing victims than they do now. I mean, it's sort of interesting. And the burden at this point is falling mostly on our detectives. We have a detective assigned to the more in-depth investigations. We have our dispatchers intake verbal complaints and then pass them off to the unit for special investigations, investigator to do a preliminary. We have an internet portal where you can fill out this allegation of the facts, and then again, it goes to the same business process. And then lastly, just out of because the people, in my opinion, got a little bit ahead of themselves with the announcement before we built up a business process. We created Orphanage at bpdbt.org as just a way to just lob an allegation in a free-form email, which is probably the least reliable way to do it, but that is available too. So we'll see how it goes. We've talked about weeks for the mental health database. It's months and months for this process. So that's where we are at that. And then lastly, the opioid fight, this is sort of, it's quasi-police, but we're on the verge, actually, in the city of doing a lot of really, really interesting things with the opioid crisis. It's like a 3 or 4 pronged approach. The first is the hospital got money from SAMHSA, Federal Agency for Health and Drug Abuse, to start a buprenorphine pilot in the emergency department. If you come in with an overdose, you don't leave with a brochure or dead like you used to. We talked about that. You now will leave with a buprenorphine prescription and a very short time frame follow-up with this addiction psychiatrist. That's a new thing. Very, very few places are doing it in the United States, and we're doing it. Dr. Kimberly Blake had her son die of an opioid overdose, and she's an OBGYN, but she has agreed to work for the Howard Center to prescribe buprenorphine at the needle exchange if you come in and get the prescription and then get a referral to treatment if you want it. If you don't want it, get the buprenorphine anyway. We're currently really closely looking at the way the state prison system does or doesn't prescribe buprenorphine in compliance with recent state laws that have been passed. So we've been working with the medical director of Rhode Island Corrections, and also the doctor that administers their program to make sure that they're inducting as many people as possible. And then, I guess lastly, the city council will be drafting a body of recommendations about all of this. But I think if you look at what we're doing with access to medication, it really is at the very cutting edge of treatment and response to the opioid crisis. And lastly, I'll say it's a product of our community stat and a product of collaboration between the police department and our opioid folks, which we've met, and the mayor's office. So we'll keep you posted on whether this makes a difference or not.
Great, thank
That's all I
you.
got.
Chief, I have a question for you. It came up in the Public Safety Committee meeting that Peter and I went to, talking about, I know that you and the mayor were really proponents of having the laws changed so that you can't bring a gun into the bars.
Right.
Is there any movement on that, or?
To be candid, no, because the first thing it would require is the state to allow Burlington to have home rule to enact its own gun regulations. And the state has never been able to do that. So just to be clear, like Vermont has no independent authority to regulate firearms in its own boundaries. It can only be in compliance with state laws. And so we'd have to either convince everyone in the state to take that approach, and to be a ban on firearms in bars at the state level, or we'd have to become like, I'm going to point across the lake, like if you're a city above a certain population in New York, you get to make your own laws. And that just doesn't exist we can have municipal ordinances, that's not what this is. So the prognosis is not good for that. But nothing prevents a private enterprise from, of its own volition, prohibiting firearms and screening for them at the door. So if we're talking about putting public pressure on places to do that, that's another issue, right? When I say publicly putting pressure on private entities to enact their own regulations,
Right.
that's another issue.
You can't regulate firearms through an ordinance at all?
No, I mean, I wish I had an attorney here. My first year here, we took a look at this, and the answer that I came away with was no. Meaning, like, we have something about discharging firearms within city boundaries. I believe that's a state law anyway. Like, within a city, you cannot discharge a firearm, other than, defend your life or something like that. But no.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll check to make sure, but I'm like 99% sure it's no.
I'll try to look
When
it
I'm
up.
talking to
I'll try to
attorneys,
look it up too.
yeah.
Because, I thought, at one point, I know we passed some ordinances, and it went to the so when you pass something that you don't have the authority for in your charter, you have to go to the legislature, and the
Right.
legislature has to approve your charter, and they didn't approve something that
Just
the
didn't get out of committee.
the voters
Yeah.
approved, but I'm not so sure it doesn't mean we can't do something on a local level. We do need to get, and I don't know about guns in particular,
Right.
but generally speaking, if we do something that's beyond our authority, that, in the way of an ordinance, it then has to go to Montpelier, and we have to get that authority added into our charter.
I'd want to sort that out, because maybe I'm saying like a less refined or correct version of what you're saying. But I know that when the mayor tried to bring this forward, it died in Montpelier. So you probably, yeah.
Okay. All right.
We should bring it again.
So, letters of commendation. Bob and I had said that we would sort of pilot, I was going to write letters to folks, and Bob was going to go to roll call. We just got them last week. I know I did a 2-week trip around the Maritimes in Canada, so I just got back 2 days ago. So we did have a couple, and
I didn't go to any roll call. I volunteered, but I haven't been able to work it out as to how to do it. I was going to go to the one involving the City Hall Park non-shooting, which I thought was really great.
Yeah, I don't know if you all saw, but there was
Yeah.
several
Yeah.
that came in literally right after I wrote an email saying I didn't have any specifics
Right.
to share with you. And then they came in and there were there was emails, there was Twitter's comments, there were various things that happened in regards to the City Hall incident and how the whole team responded to that, as well as another incident involving an incident at the hospital, and overwhelming support for the officer and the team's ability to de-escalate and handle it
Yep.
extremely well. I think, so there's two things. One, it was wonderful, and, you know, Bob, I know you were trying to come to the roll call, but if you want to add anything of your own specific comments, but as far as this process of how you guys can help to recognize this, I think there's two things. One is addressing officers, and certainly something going to them and then into their file is great.
Yep.
See if we can get to roll call, but as I said to Bob, it's been very busy around here lately, so coordinating that this week we didn't get to it. But then I think also if there's a way we can also get further the public awareness of these responses, you know, any way we can. I'd love to see. No, I need to.
We had a guy that wrote us from jail saying thank you for
Yeah.
not hurting that guy who had the episode with the knife. So I don't know why that was poignant, but it just seemed like.
Oh, sure.
You don't get to write a lot of, maybe you just get to write a lot of letters in jail. I just thought it was like to take the time to offer, you know, a feather in the police's cap from a prisoner was worth noting, so, yeah.
So we could certainly keep working on this process and getting better. This last month has been a tough one.
Okay, and it may come up, we're going to be talking about the role of the police commission, and there may be a way for us to get that out there more in the public, at least to city council, so.
So if, I'm going to channel Christine. Christine wanted that item on the webpage, right? So people could.
Compliments.
Yeah, and so if we did that.
No, I'm just like, yeah, you're right.
So that would enable you to build into that consent from the person that we can publish their letter. Because obviously one of the letters we got in this month's packet was someone who was in the ED. We wouldn't publish their name, right? It was very personal, saying thanks for not shooting me. But if you had that item on the portal, then, or, you know, on the webpage, then we could build in consent on there, saying, do we have your
Yeah.
permission? Do
This is what
you
we
either
asked,
do or
like,
you
do you wish to
don't?
remain anonymous, or maybe we share
Yeah,
this
so
as
either,
well?
yeah, something like that. That's the benefit of doing that. Because otherwise, on these, we still could write back to all these people, but it's more work, right? To say, can we publish this, or can we share this? Right.
And, yeah, and one of the comments we talked about is making it more, the complaint submission more accessible around the community. Perhaps there's both, you know,
Mhm.
awareness of the portal, but also the ability to say thank you.
Right. Right.
Things like,
Well, that leads us right into our role, the role of the Police Commission's Civilian Oversight Initiative. So a few things have happened. The first being, since we met, I did meet with the city attorney. Did I talk about that already at the last meeting? I've been away, so my brain is, I went and met with Eileen and Nick, the city attorney and assistant attorney, and trying to get my hands around what is it that we were supposed to be doing before we went to the Public Safety Committee meeting, because I didn't want to go to Public Safety not fully understanding what we were supposed to do. And it was really, I got some clarity around what it is that we're supposed to do. And we really did drop the ball as a commission, we were supposed to get back to public safety by June. But, you know, we had some transitions, and that's just a fact. So Peter and I went to public safety, and one of the things that we did, one of the goals of going, as you know from our last meeting, was we asked for an extension. And they gave us a 2-month extension. So we need to report back with our final opinions on the process to them at the December meeting. So we're going to be on the agenda for December. So that gives us some time, and I know, Randall, you haven't been part of reviewing complaints, and that was one of the things that Peter and I said to them. We have a new commissioner who'd like to actually have the opportunity to go through the process and see what that's like. So that's what we came out of that meeting with. We also talked to them, and they felt strongly that we as a commission should report back to City Council twice a year, saying how the oversight's going. Let them know, I could imagine that we'd let them know quantitatively, here's how many complaints have come in, here's how many minor complaints, if there's been any major complaints, and just our perspective on how we see those complaints being handled. I would like to, at that point, getting back to the letters of accommodation, to say also, and we've received X number of letters about police officers. So here's what we've heard from the public about the positive things and the professionalism, et cetera, and here's the complaints and here's the stats behind it and our perception. And that's what public safety really wanted, and they didn't want to have the wording be may, they wanted to have it be will report to City Council. And their perspective was that they want to do this so that the community knows that as citizens on the commission, somebody is paying attention to the complaints that come in and have the opportunity to review the complaints. Peter, was there anything else that I'm forgetting?
I don't think. No, I think just that we need to kind of get back in touch with them more often than we have, and I think every, twice a year, I think seemed like a good idea. That's what we worked out.
Yep. And we had one of the things, I think, Peter, you had suggested it, do we go to public safety and report in? And public safety felt, no, it's really important to go to City Council so that everybody can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
One thing you had mentioned was that it could be an expansion on the annual report.
For one of the times.
Right.
Yep.
And then the second would be more focused on that, but this could be kind of brought into that.
Yep. So when we go with the annual report, part of that can be how the citizen oversight is going, and then we'll go another, halfway through the year, we'll go back in and report again. So, one of the things that also came out of that is there is a draft resolution that is in draft form because public safety is waiting to hear back from us about that draft, so they can go to City Council and say, here are any changes, or this has been tested and it looks great. So there's a resolution in addition to the, the role of the police commission, which is what we reviewed last time. This one, I sent it to everybody to look at with the changes that we had talked about as a group. That's right. We talked about the changes. I went to meet with Eileen and Nick, and they incorporated our recommendations from that meeting into here, right? So what I would like to propose we do is any questions that we have about this role of the Burlington Police Commission, because I know that some came up. I'll create a list because Eileen and Nick said they would come to our October 30th meeting and be able to address any of those questions. So people have questions, concerns that they'd like to ask the city attorney, we can talk about that now, and I'll make a list so that when she comes and when her assistant attorney comes, we can, use their time wisely here. So, does anybody have any thoughts about this? I know everybody's read it, and
There was a question about the two complaints, citizen complaint, and then I guess internal, and then if those citizen complaints translates into an an internal investigation that results in discipline, how the two matters are handled under the, only, if I understood it, only the external complaint is under this process, and there's a different process to evaluate internal discipline?
I have my non-legal interpretation of what she said, but I would rather just, let's make a list so that Eileen can address that, because
Okay, sure.
I asked it, but I may
No,
not
I
give the right.
remember seeing it in your message, and I wasn't sure.
And, you know, I may not say it in the right way, so let's, she did make clear that the spirit of this was for external complaints. That's what they are looking
Mhm.
for, but, Jim, why don't, we'll make sure we ask. Since Eileen's coming, let's
Sure, that'd
ask
be
her.
great.
Okay. Anything else that we want to get any clarification on from the city attorney?
Well, I mean, I had raised the question earlier about whether or not, I think in the draft that I saw circulated, there was some language to the effect that, you know, if the commission had concerns about how a particular case was resolved, that the commission then had some options for what to do next. One of the requirements in the commission escalating that concern was that it be run by the city attorneys first before presenting their concerns to before the commission presents its concerns to the city council. And so I expressed some concern about whether or not that step was necessary, whether it's necessary that we run concerns by the city attorney first, or whether whether the police commission understand it to be bound by concerns of confidentiality, but otherwise not require some sign-off from the city attorney prior to escalating concerns. So.
I think we'll let her speak to that. One of the things that she had said is it was mostly just for confidentiality because all the police officers are city employees, and there's some confidentiality that we want to make sure before we would go to city council and accidentally say anything that wouldn't be appropriate for the employee. So, but why don't we ask her exactly what she's talking about? That's great, thank you. Because again, my non-legal interpretation may be wrong. Anybody else have anything that they want to check in? No?
We can
Okay.
send you comments before the 30th.
Yeah, if you read through this and you have any other
Okay.
questions, just send them along.
Great.
Okay? Okay, so this one is, and I actually sent you the copy that's marked up, so you can see the edits that the city attorney made. The one thing that we will add to, actually, we won't add it to this, we'll probably add it to the resolution that we're going to be presenting to city council, our findings as citizens doing the oversight.
So just to be clear, you all will submit questions for her to you or me? Just, I want to make sure that how we're assembling these questions for Eileen for next meeting.
I would suggest that they send them to both of us.
Okay.
You
perfect.
and me, and then we'll work on.
Have a separate
Yeah.
document off the agenda.
Yep,
Questions, okay.
yep.
So this is different from what we just gave you in addition to those, or should those also be something that we convey in?
If you're not thinking of a question right now, but something comes up as you reread this, just to know before, the end of October, send us the questions.
But the ones that we've mentioned, and Randall mentioned, I mentioned, those are
Those
you're
are all
already gonna
set.
put those in?
Those
Okay.
are all set,
Okay,
yeah,
great.
yep,
Thanks.
yep.
And that's not, I assume, a prerequisite for any question being asked of the attorneys when they're here during the meeting on the October 30th, right? So if a question comes up that day, we can talk, yeah.
Totally, I mean, their responses may generate additional questions, that would be, yeah. I wanted us, truthfully, they're coming here, I wanted us to just be proactive in thinking about that versus just kind of on the spot, just to make sure that we're giving this the thought and due diligence that we should be doing. So, one of the things that became abundantly clear is there's two parts to this civilian oversight. The first part, and it states it The commission will ensure that citizen complaint forms are available in multiple locations throughout the city, including the police department and online, and that they may be submitted in a variety of ways or locations, including the chief's office, the city attorney's office, the commission itself, which I'm not sure how we would quite do that, and the mayor's office. In thinking about this, I don't remember who mentioned this, that oftentimes, new Americans in the community may not want to come into the police station to fill out a complaint, or, it just may be difficult for folks because they have a different experience with authority and police in the countries that they come from, that maybe we make sure that some of those complaints are available at the refugee resettlement, at AA, what is it called? LV. AALV, so that we make sure that we make it really safe and easy for people, if they have an experience that they want to, file a complaint about, that they can do that. So when I read this, those are the types of things that as the commission we should be thinking about. Those are the two that came to my mind. But if there's anything else, that falls within our jurisdiction and responsibility, is on the one hand, to make sure it's very easy for people to complain, people feel safe to do that, and on the other hand, then just being involved in the process and making sure they're all handled well. So, those are the two, after spending a lot of time on this, those are the two chunks that really kind of, that I see. Laura did send me, Chief Del Pozo has a letter that goes along with the complaints. Based on this, we thought it might be a good idea to have the letter come from both the chief and the commission.
Sure.
And that way, when people are filing a complaint, they also know that as fellow citizens, as the commission, we're going to be looking at those as well.
May even want to rewrite the letter a bit to say that, an independent, I can argue about what independent means, but an independent commission will have the opportunity, the members of an independent commission will have the opportunity to review the complaint and its outcome, right?
Yep,
I think that'll be,
And
yeah.
then sign it.
Yeah.
So my request
Sorry, could you
is,
just clarify what you mean when you say the letter goes along with the complaint? Is the letter that people receive after submitting complaints, or is it a letter that they see when they're in the process of preparing a complaint?
I think it's process
Yes.
preparing the complaint.
When they go to make a complaint, there's a letter and then a form that they submit online. So this would be doing the same thing, but in physical locations as well. And we can obviously edit.
Right, so the
and update
PDF has, if you PDF it, there's a letter, and then online, there's a preamble.
And is it translated at
No.
all? Is-
I'm not saying that dismissively, I'm just admitting it's not translated, I would.
It's something we could do.
Yeah.
I know it's not cheap, but.
No, I don't think it's we had in our uniform lobby, a bunch of forms in different languages as well. I mean, I don't think that's a bad endeavor. I think maybe we can go to the AALV or whomever and ask for some help translating stuff.
So, I'm going to ask my VP, would you mind taking a look at that letter? I mean, you're very good at that. And maybe editing it, or, okay, that would be great.
I'll send it to the chief for his.
Yeah, that would be great. And then we'll, once we get the
Sure.
verbiage right. I always think if you have an idea, you can't just have an idea and let someone else do it. It's just the way I lead my life. So once we get the letter in the complaint form, I'll go, and if anyone wants to come with me, I'm going to go to the Vermont Refugee Resettlement and to AALD and say, on behalf of the Police Commission, I'm here. We want to make sure it's easy. Here's the letters. If you have any questions, give a call. So once we have the letter, I'll do that. Okay. If anyone wants to join me, it'd be great. So if anyone else has any ideas on how we can make it easier, I love your idea about the translation. While I'm there, I'll
We
talk
can
to
ask.
them, and they might even volunteer to have someone translate it. But that seems to be, we really want to make sure that that population of people, that it's very easy for them to share their experience if they have something that they need to let us know about. Okay? Anything else on this topic? Okay,
Thank you for all you do.
for sure. Okay. All right, and all of my thing, let's see, the distribution of incoming complaints, we talked about that, and locations. Okay, great. So, commissioner updates, comments? Anybody have any?
So I have one quick comment. Yesterday evening, I attended a neighborhood safety forum. It was held at the Old North End Community Center. There were concerns about a rash of break-ins that have been happening in the Old North End surrounding areas. Deputy Chief Wright was there along with Officer DeFranco. They gave some useful information. There were some concerns by some of the members of the community, in particular about how community information gets disseminated from the police to people. There was, I guess, a system a few years ago, Nixle. That system is no longer used to communicate information about incidents in the community. People wanted some kind of replacement or some kind of surrogate for that system.
Right.
I think they were unhappy with the thought that the Twitter and Facebook feeds were supplanting that. They thought that was not as good of a solution for various reasons, but in any event, what they wanted was some source of information about what incidents have been happening. And some of the people want a lot of information, who was suspected was perpetrating various acts, when people are getting released from prison, things like that. But people wanted some kind of information, more information from the police about various incidents than they feel like they're getting right now. I said I would pass along the information. So.
Yeah, I can respond to some of that if you'd like. Twitter was created by a software company as a product for use by police as a one-way method of communication. The simplest way to categorize it is it gives out push notifications across texts. Before I got here, we had a very small Twitter and Facebook presence, and Twitter was used to, Nixle was used to push out links to press releases that when you clicked on them went to a PDF. I didn't feel comfortable with that for a few reasons. It's just giving people, and I'll qualify a bit of what I'm saying in a moment, but hey, here's a like getting text saying, here's a press release, click here, maybe a preamble, and you go and you just read our press release online. I felt that there was no way to communicate back. I also however, what I do want to start using Nixle again for is emergency push notifications. So if there's a parking ban, if there's an evacuation, if there's, I say this not to be lighthearted, if there's a killer on the loose, right? Or traffic will be shut down for a multi-alarm fire. I think that is a good use for push notifications. I think if you want to talk about by neighborhood particular incidents, what Nixle does not give us is the ability to particularize notifications to particular neighborhoods. It doesn't geofence that way. That's one of the reasons why it's free. It's just everyone in your jurisdiction, and I thought that it would be more appropriate if we're doing press releases to use Front Porch Forum, which has a crime report section, or it has just a announcement section, and I can do 2 a month to the entire city. Laura can do 2. Deputy Chief Murad will be able to do 2, and Mike can do 2. To the whole city, we'll be able to game it till they figure it out. But to individual neighborhoods and clusters of neighborhoods, you can do an unlimited number of postings. So if people are worried about crime that way, I like the collaborative and iterative and interactive way that Front Porch Forum works, where we can say something, and the very next day, someone else can say something in response. And we can link to press releases and stuff. As far as like the sort of micro level of who's getting out of jail and why, I mean, some agencies were required to let you know when sex offenders are getting out. It's not clear that I want to let everybody know that a guy's getting out of jail or a gal. Like, they've done their time, they're re-entering the community, and if they're re-perpetrating again, like, we're the police, we'll try to figure that out and let folks know. And the last thing is, as far as individual incidents, online now, we have every type of incident except sex crimes available on a map, sortable by any date range you want. So if you want to know, and I was just talking to Nancy, we're probably, right now, we deliberately like ambiguate, is that a word, ambiguate? The precise addresses. But we're talking to Rutland, I mean, they're right, like freedom of information. I wouldn't want to do that for sex crimes and certain types of victims, but we can actually put down the exact addresses of those crimes too. So if someone wants to know where the burglaries and robberies and everything are, they can know whether it's the last 5 days or the last 6 days or all the way back to 2012. All they have to do is just look on a map and see exactly where they're happening within the block in their own neighborhood. And so for us then to say we're going to send out a series of notifications about it, I don't know, it just seems a little redundant considering that it's a much greater level of detail if you just go online.
Have we educated folks that,
So when I got here for a while, I mean, I do send out, we use Twitter to educate them about it, but that's the, no, and so the thing I understand about Twitter too, that like you can go to our page and see our notifications. If you're just monitoring the Twitter feed, there's so much noise on Twitter, especially these days. So I would be amenable to educating folks about this because we put a tremendous amount of information online.
right, I think it would be worth one of your global Front Porch Forum messages to be, you know, yeah, we're not necessarily doing Nixle, or what is that what it's
Right.
called?
Yeah.
But here are the various ways you can stay informed.
Yeah, I mean, just by way of sympathy, had any of you heard of Nixle, but you is a customer, or, it's this thing that was like, it's push notifications, and I think that we want, it was designed at a time when the police were afraid to get into social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Front Porch Forum, which I think is a cleaner and more communitarian way to do it. It was like, well, you don't want to touch those things because they're lightning rods and you're not as cool as the millennials and you'll mess it up. So we'll give you this very sterile way to do push notifications. And I think that works for parking bans and emergencies, but I don't think it's how we want our meat and potatoes communications to occur. And I've said that to, I think there's a particular person that was asking that question. She really believes in the power of Nixle. I don't share her opinion, but I do agree that we could do a better job of putting more on Front Porch Forum as a good way to communicate.
And I'll just say, right, so without kind of endorsing or criticizing the motivation behind the view, I'll just say more about what I think the reasoning was, right, which was that, one, so right, so the push notification factor was considered to be a positive rather than negative, right? You know, that these things are going out automatically, you know, notices about crime reports, things like that. Second, that Twitter, Facebook, et cetera, are not useful because, as you said, the information gets quickly buried under lots of other information. Also, that the One North Ave Twitter feed is not just kind of information about incidents, but also kind of, you know, positive information / propaganda, but from the police department, and that these are not things that someone wants to wade through, and that, right. So I think people are appreciating the information they get from Front Porch Forum, but the other concern is that a lot of that information is going to be posted by their neighbors, and so that doesn't have, you know, so the worry is that it ends up straying into rumor rather than kind of official information. And so I think what we want is official information pushed out by the police department about incidents that they particularly care about. And so you're right, so I think that's the motivation. Now, if that functionality can be replicated by what we have right now, I think that would be appreciated, and then we can get the information side of things going. I just need to educate people how that works.
If a Front Porch Forum post comes from myself or Laura Cheney or one of the chiefs, it's not a rumor. I mean, unless I'm doing something insidious, right? It's an assertion, and I think that having thought about what she was saying and trying to take it seriously, I think that that's the solution I'd like to try.
Right.
But I also have to ask, like, I don't. We want to be. If you really want to know what's happening with violent crimes in your neighborhood, like it's right there up to the 36 hours or 24 hours. I wonder, unless we believe that there's like a danger to the. I mean, so let me digress for a second. Like, I shouldn't be reminding folks like lock your doors and windows because recently there's a burglary. Like that's going to be true forever, right? I worry about police departments that really put out robbery and burglary notices in a way that like constantly reminds people that they should be afraid. It's like trying to keep myself in business, or the next thing we'll be saying is, and we're going to need to take this new enhanced step to keep you safe, right? So I don't know if I want to be blasting out to the entire city on Nixle like every armed robbery that happens in the city or every burglary, because I don't understand, and I'm not saying this flippantly as the chief of police. I need to have a value proposition about how that notification contributes to public safety rather than just making people afraid. And I want to understand that better.
So I actually, so now I'm speaking from my own view, I actually agree with that. And I do think that, given that the information is available online on the city, on the police department webpage, I think that ought to be enough if people are kind of informed sufficiently that information is there and that's how they access it. I agree with your reasoning about whether we want to be continually posting information about things, but I did want to make sure I reported
I don't
the
want to
request.
seem negative, but I fielded a lot of calls about this topic, and there's no consensus. Like, some people have never heard of Nixle. Some people don't want to have a computer because they're afraid they're going to get hacked. So they don't go to Front Porch Forum, and they don't want to go to a website. Some people are mad that it's not on Facebook. So I've talked to so many people in the last year that I've been here, and been trying to figure out, like, is there a better solution? And I've asked a lot of people around here, and everybody wants to get their information a different way. I was just suggested, why don't we do something like the Williston Observer, where there's like a ticker with all the incidents that are happening, and Burlington isn't Williston. There's a lot of, I mean, you could pick at that a lot of different ways. So I don't know that there's one fix, but everybody wants it in a different format.
Well, the piece is, you just do the best,
Yeah.
you pick the best one. And it sounds to me, I personally, I don't know everybody, I really would have a hard time if we announced every armed robbery and things. I think we'd have a culture of fear, which we have that enough. So,
Well, I mean, yeah, we have about 300 burglaries a year in the city. That's reported to us, and I'm sure that there's actually many unreported burglaries as well. Not of late, but in general, people just, some college kids who see an open window and a missing MacBook sometimes just don't report it, or anyone. That's remarkably constant. So if I notice like a huge rash of burglaries or a year-over-year increase, I think I'd be more inclined to say something about it. But the same life experience that people have had in the last 3 or 4 years regarding burglaries is the one they're having now. If, however, we were looking for a white male in a black hoodie with white sneakers who's seen going in and out of windows, I would put that out to the community, right? I need a value proposition to let people know about crime. Or if, on the other hand, God forbid, there was somebody who was, assaulting people sexually or otherwise when he or she was entering an apartment, and I want to let everyone know. Thankfully, we don't have anything like that right now.
great. Randall, thank you for attending that meeting on our behalf. That was great. It was a last-minute request, so thank you.
Yes, thank you.
It was awesome. I just have two things. One, we talked about ComStat and Substat, and I did sign up to attend both of them, the next two meetings. So if anyone wants to join me, love to have company. I'll be able to report back in. And then tomorrow, there is a luncheon, and Neri, if you're interested, I think, Laura, are you going to go to that? There's a luncheon at City Hall for women. It's a women's luncheon, and it's about women in police, fire, and corrections jobs. So just wanted to put that out there if you wanted to join
Yeah, and I
us.
think there's some other detectives and officers, female officers, and perhaps dispatch that are also.
Fantastic. Great. Great. Anything else there?
I had one question, Chief. I saw the vehicle the other day out on the street for the first time.
How'd you feel?
It looked big. But I was just curious, because we had talked about this idea of what's it started out in the driving around, like whether there would be a policy or exactly how this was going to be utilized. So I was just looking for an update on where that might
We have a memo
be.
that hasn't graduated into a policy yet, but it's about we can circulate that. You don't have it with you, do you?
You don't, I can print it out real quick.
No, I don't, I just was curious where things were with it and what the intentions were.
No, we have a draft policy, and it's been good to have it out. There was a time where there was a lot of disturbances at bar closing. We used the light set on it to light up Main Street from South Winooski to Church, because all the bars had turned their lights out, and it was able to, without the police having to grapple or use force, they were able to light the block up in a way that dispersed it. So there's, advantages to having it out like that. It's also responded to barricaded situations in Colchester and Shelburne that were resolved without force. And it was on the way to the City Hall Park with the knife, but that was resolved before it got there. So I will, no pun intended, stick to my guns. It's better to have it mobile than waiting to get deployed. Except we had it at the Champlain, so, a way to acclimate the community to it and orient them. the Baird School actually, at the Howard Center, asked for its students to be able to see it like in a positive way, because the Champlain Elementary School students got to see it, and apparently that created an inequality of access to a police truck. So there are some people who say, the police don't need this, or it's a wolf in sheep's clothing, but that's really the minority. I mean, I'm not saying you said that. I'm saying that some people who are sort of, critical of the police all along see this as another opportunity. But people who I thought were going to really dislike it, like I'm just being my own stereotype, like a woman with tie-dyed shirt and a henna tattoo was like, oh, really? That's really cool that's why you have it out there. So I'm saying there is, but it's incumbent on us to explain it that way, not just drive it around as if it's this hulking machine. Like, I think a lot of it comes from letting people know what's in there.
Yep.
And that it's very few weapons and a lot of equipment. And we do have a multi-page set of guidance for its use that we will send you.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Can I make a request for information just about the status of the plans for moving to Regional Dispatch Center?
Yes, I wish that, well, actually, Mike Warren just got up and left because he's going to the dispatch meeting about the Regional Dispatch Center, because it's a bi-weekly, is it monthly, or I don't know how frequently the meeting is. Every few weeks at 7 o'clock, it happens to be tonight, there's a meeting about that. You know what we could also do, if you like, is ask Chief Locke is the city official who's in charge of it, and I think that because it affects us, if you'd like to have a briefing on that, that might be something you could do right here. Does that sound? So I know I didn't give you an answer because I don't have
Yeah, no,
something about where it's at.
That would be good if that could happen.
Okay, maybe we put it on the agenda after Eileen comes, so that we don't have too many things on the agenda. We can actually, I feel a responsibility to get back to public safety, so I want to make that a priority, and then we can invite them. We have a directive here, but it's not on the agenda. Do we need to talk about this directive?
Yeah, sorry, we skipped past the additions, but I did note, I have it in minutes that
Oh,
we
we
need to
did.
add Directive 42 City Lock Access Card.
Do we need to do a motion to add something to the agenda? I'm sorry, I don't know what the rules of order are.
I don't know, that was, I skipped that. Why don't we, does anybody have any additions to the agenda?
And we have
Oh.
Directive 42.
Let's go back to step one.
Okay, so let's add Directive 42.
So, are we authorized to discuss it? What's going on?
I read it, it made good sense to me.
Yeah.
It says,
It made no sense, or
no,
made
it
sense?
makes
Good
good
sense.
sense.
It made good sense to me. I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, just to give you a little bit, so now these, these doors that you see folks entering and leaving by are controlled by cards. I've been a huge advocate for the police with the proper audit trails and regulations, like in this procedure, being able to access not the heart of city facilities, but at least to be able, in the execution of emergency police business outlined there, to be able to use the cards to enter city buildings. There was some discussion, the mayor and the city attorney were in support of that. And then UVM just mailed us a stack of separate cards, saying we think cops should have access to the entire hospital using cards to respond in an emergency. And that was kind of what gave me the rhetorical force of saying, a private entity is mailing us cards saying if the police need to get in, here's the key to the hospital, why don't we give them the key to the city? And the thought is, if you're investigating a burglary, or there's an injured person behind there, or maybe you're, God forbid, making a tactical entry into a building, you want to get in silently, having the card that you use to get into your headquarters work to open up
Right.
city buildings is good sense, and there's precedent for it in other police agencies. I can go into that. But if you look at the prohibitions, you can never use it for personal reasons, and you also can't use it for administrative reasons. And if the facility's open during the business day and you have a meeting, you can't use it then either. You have to wait like everyone else. So it's and there is an audit trail. Every time a key is held up to a door, it creates a record of which key and which door. So we will be able to police that.
Okay. Now, do we need a motion to approve these?
Yeah. Make a motion, we approve it as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So be it. So the minutes of the previous meeting, consent agenda, does anybody have any comments?
I made some date corrections. I had noticed that, so those are fixed. It said July in
Okay.
one place. It's August.
Okay. Motion to accept?
Move to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm just
Aye.
abstaining, I wasn't there.
Okay, great. Next meeting agenda items. Well, the big one is gonna be Eileen coming, and please forward any questions that you might have. But you don't, to Randall's point, you don't need to. We'll have a conversation with her. So if some questions come up, they're here to answer all of our concerns. Any other agenda items that we feel like we should put on that one? No? Okay. And now we need to make a motion to end the meeting?
Well, to go into executive session.
To executive session.
So what do we have for purpose? We need to.
Internal investigations.
Okay, so I move that we go into executive session to talk about internal investigations
And also promotions.
and promotions.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay.